Welcome to the Forecast with Gary Lezak and
Bob Lyons.
Bob Lyons. Hey, it's great to see everyone.
I'm not
here.
the attraction. We don't have to. We don't have to point it out.
But it looks like you got all cleaned up today. Look at this.
Well, I meant to
You haven't
shave.
shaved.
I did get a haircut because I was looking pretty rough. There's that old adage that, like, what is it? An unemployed developer is very slovenly, right? Like, looks disgusting. But like somebody who's looking for a job is very clean shaven.
Yeah. Well,
so this actually should be the resemblance of success.
Yeah.
Because I don't
think so.
need to look presentable.
Yeah, well, you look good. I mean,
Hey,
you
thanks.
got a haircut and everything.
Thank you very much.
So did I.
You're sharp. You
Yeah,
look
thank
real sharp.
Well, this podcast, the Forecast with Gary Lezak, is brought to you by Results Personal Fitness. That's right. Do we have a permit?
Golly.
Right.
Did you bring the permit? Did you? All
yeah,
right. Do you have to
yeah.
renew it every
The
week?
results. I get results by working out at Results. It's at 135th.
That's it. Putting in the work is the permit. There you
And
go.
I just had a huge workout. So thank you to David Schlossman.
Love it.
30 sets today. Okay.
30.
30 sets.
Is that legal?
That's not a lot.
Okay.
I mean, we could do more.
Okay.
But 30 sets in about 45 minutes, and we did back and traps and shoulders. I did a whole bunch of pull-ups and some shoulder press.
Oh, I love pull-ups.
So,
Shoulder press, great.
yeah, I know.
It's good work. How's shoulder stability these days?
Good.
Is
good.
it weather in
Yeah,
the...
I did dumbbells, so,
Oh, yeah. You got to get the stability in there. That's
I
good
know.
stuff. Yeah.
So contact David Results at 135th and Metcalf, and you've got Steve and Don and Chris and the gang, and
It's a lot of collective wisdom, huh?
I know. So go there
Okay.
and check it out. So also, this is brought to you by Uphold Home.
Uphold home.
That's right, Uphold Home. So as you go on to your golden years, contact Uphold Home, and maybe you could stay at home. The plan is to stay at home, optimize your health. That would be
Great
fantastic.
idea. Yeah. Use it as an opportunity, right?
Right.
Conceptually, it's a different way of thinking about. Is it strictly about aging, or is it recovery from anything?
It's mostly for as you're aging. You
Sure.
know, I hate that word.
Oh,
aging.
what would be?
Because I'm aging.
Well, I think
like-
scientifically everything is aging.
I know you're aging too.
Yes, I feel horrifically old on a consistent basis.
So, but if you're considering putting one of your loved ones into a home,
Sure.
or they would prefer to stay at home, this option of staying at home, Uphold
Yeah.
Home, is a great option. And with the physicians and the dietitians helping you out, optimizing, bringing in meals, you can optimize your health.
I see. Yes, that is a great system. I
there
love
you
it.
go.
See, we're rethinking the way. Well, so you need to remarket the term aging then.
Right.
What is a better terminology?
Getting on into your golden years.
I like that. Okay, that's very nice. We're all headed there quickly.
That's right.
It feels like.
So I'm never going to turn golden, but anyway. So today, what is our topic going to be today?
Oh, I don't know. You tell me. You wanna talk some tech talk?
Yeah, I
some
do.
some models, some
Yeah.
stats.
Yeah, the LRC stands for the Lezak Recurring Cycle. Is named by the bloggers way back in 2002, 2003, 2003, when we had the system we were bringing to the market and explaining how you can actually predict the weather long range.
Right.
And we have developed a model, what we call a statistical model.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it's different than the physics-based models, and it is accurate. And so that's what's going to be our topic of
great.
today. It's effective, it's accurate, it works.
Absolutely. It's interesting. I feel like this is a common misnomer where people assume that you named the LRC after yourself, as though this is like an egocentric concept. I think it's good that you're clarifying it, that everybody else, like you kept referring to it as a cycle, and then eventually they
I
named
called
it
it
for
my
you.
hypothesis, my theory, my hypothesis.
Right.
And then somebody said, hey, it should be called the LRC.
And I like we've tried to tinker with the naming because it is tough. It's tough to be received because there is this immediate judgmental, like, well, you named it after yourself, so I don't know. There must be only built around your ego or what you believe your concept to be. But it is kind of funny that it was an army of other individuals who sort of just started calling that. It's like the idea of like, a Xerox or Kleenex, right? It's like, it just sort of became ubiquitous and then you can't get rid of it. So
Right.
the LRC, I think it's a fair
Or
clarification.
like here in Kansas City, Edelman and Thompson.
Oh, yes, of course.
It's like, oh my gosh, how did they name their company? It's after themselves.
It's
right?
well, right. How dare they?
Yeah.
That's a very lawyer-centric.
So-
I don't know. Is that an ego-driven business, you think?
I don't know.
I guess we don't get in the
Isn't
swamp.
it called the Ellen DeGeneres Show?
That is true.
Okay.
How dare?
How ego-driven is that?
Well, okay, but is Ellen DeGeneres is not a scientist. I mean, I'm trying to always play the devil's advocate here.
Well,
So,
my point is, yeah, I didn't name it.
of course, yeah.
Whatever.
Sorry. I'm dragging you deep into
in 20 years or 30 years or 5 years from now, when it really is saving lives and helping businesses like it already is doing now, and it grows, whatever it's named, it's named. It doesn't have to be called the LRC.
Right,
That
yeah.
is not important to me. The important thing is what the model's able to do. And so let's talk about the model.
Let's talk about the model. My goodness. So yeah, that was a very good introduction because right now, I don't know, maybe we go through a very brief synopsis of like current physics modeling forecasting systems, right?
Right.
The traditional systems that have been used for a very long time. This goes back to even, I don't remember the year, but there was a mathematician, I don't know, what do we think, 70, 80 years ago. The idea was going to be to get a giant auditorium of mathematicians who all sit in there. They give them the initial conditions and they run it out by hand. And that was the earliest concept of like a forecasting modeling system, right? So it was just a bunch of, because I mean, and
I used to have those cards that you had to punch ones and zeros into.
oh, like that's how you fed in programming?
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
Remember, I'm old enough for that.
Well, man, did you partake in
Yes.
really?
I actually did. This is way back when.
Yeah,
in the
this is the
70s.
good stuff, yeah.
We punched ones and zeros and
Yeah.
did our programs, and very, very simple programs for me as a teenager.
Sure, yeah.
But, it evolved from there.
I love, it's kind of a fascinating concept because the level of precision and confidence that you needed to just go with your shoebox of cards, because you only, like the way it usually worked out is you had like a window where like, all right, you get the machine for 10 minutes
Right.
at
and
3
you took
a.m.
your 20 cards, which was your program, and you put them in.
Right, and so you better be pretty confident in what you're doing, because otherwise you're wasting your time, and then it starts back over again, because you can't exactly you can't troubleshoot on the fly. Whereas like the way that I sort of was, I wouldn't say taught, but I've adapted. We can be kind of careless because you get immediate feedback, right? So like you find a bug immediately and then you fix it. It's not a whole like, all right, I punched my cards. I'm hoping for the best. We'll see what happens. Now we can kind of afford to be a little more sloppy just because it doesn't, the consequences aren't as dire.
Right.
Which is fascinating.
And great programmers still have new things they keep learning each year. So it's fascinating.
Oh, it's such an evolving concept, no doubt. And I think I'll get into that a little bit as we discuss our modeling techniques, because what is available to the computer science industry and programming industry and software industry, all these things, it's mind-blowing. I think it's a component of a lot of the explosions of technology that we're seeing, the removal of stigma of kind of what we're doing, whatever. We'll get into all of that. But let's see, how do we begin? Physics models. Okay. Weather forecasting via physics models. So you view wind as a fluid. So you have physics and these fluid dynamics, right? So the key concept is initial conditions, okay? So right there you have a problem, because our measuring instruments can only be so accurate, and you can only measure so many parts of the atmosphere and so many parameters and whatnot, right? We would like to think that we're perfect in all these ways, and our scientific community has advanced a lot, but initial conditions are still the problem, right? So you take all these parameters, you plug them into physics equations, and you try to then guess. You say, all right, according to this is going to be this is the energy, where the energy is flowing. This is the motion. Again, it's fluid dynamics.
Well, it's called quasi-geostrophic theory, or QG theory. And what happens, we take all these initial conditions.
Sure.
And these initial conditions are, the majority of them come from balloons, weather balloons that are sent up all over the world, maybe 500 stations every single day, in the morning and at night, every day at 0Z and 12Z. Z stands for Zulu. So right now in Kansas City, that would be at 7 in the morning and 7 in the evening. These balloons go up in Topeka, Kansas is where it goes up. And it goes up to maybe 30, 40,000 feet or 50,000 feet, and then it'll finally pop, and the instruments will fall down to the ground. They might land in your yard.
Yeah.
But the conditions over Topeka might end up being at Columbia by the time it pops and goes over. So it says it's in Topeka, but it's really possibly much farther downstream. So there's the first initial indication, the conditions that could be an error already right there at the beginning.
Right. Now, we're doing our best. Do they have a name? It's like Radiosonde?
Radiosonde.
Radiosonde. Okay, yeah. It is funny. I've dealt with a lot of the raw data that those output, right? And they have to tell you what the drift was. One of the parameters that it records is like, I think I drifted X miles away from where I was released at these coordinates. Here was the direction that the wind was blowing. So, like, you can do your best approximation of, like,
have a good idea of where it is.
Yeah, so you can do a pretty good job. But it is still pretty approximate. Right. I mean, you're releasing balloons into the atmosphere.
So those are the conditions that go into the models that are the physics models today. So those models begin with errors, and they're still somewhat accurate. Day 1, day 2, day 3 forecasts based on these equations and based on the model of the day, we'll have some accuracy, so we can predict the weather the next 3 days, 5 days out pretty good, better than ever before. When you get beyond 5 days, 10 days to 15 days, that's when meteorologists say there's a limit on accuracy.
Sure, and again, we agree with that. This is something that we kind of parrot over and over and over. But we do agree, again, because you're dealing with the difficulty of initial conditions, and then you're producing these models, you run it over and over and over, and then you sort of throw out the ones that are absurd, right? And then you go, okay, so out of what was left, here's, you have to use your scientific, your meteorological intuition. You have to say, all right, I think this is the solution that makes the most sense for what's going to happen, what I'm looking at now and what can and will happen. So it is a difficult process. It seems like in the last decade, the main advancements were just throw more processing power at it.
Right.
Because there's what, 5 or 6 big there's what, the Euro, there's
the European model, the GFS, which is the American model.
Sure.
And then you have the NAM model.
Yeah.
And North American mesoscale model. And then you have the HRRR that I call, some people call the HRR. It's HRRR. I call it that. And then you have the RUC model and the Canadian model, the German model, which is the ICON model. And so you have in the UCMET, you have all these different models that are run, and they're all based on similar physics. Okay?
Conceptually, right, yeah.
Different, maybe varying different types of tweaks to them.
Sure.
And they all come out with their solutions depending on how they begin and how their model is run. So those physics-based models have some accuracy. The LRC model that we are using now, and it's interesting, and it's a statistical model, but it also uses meteorology as we know it today.
Absolutely, yeah.
So for example, our initial conditions at 100 days out are conditions that we already saw that happen. So it's hopefully calculated out some of those errors because it's literally that day's what has actually happened already.
Right,
so for example, a severe weather outbreak, and while we're recording this in late March 30th, and there's a severe weather potential for March 31st and another one next week. Especially the one for next week. We made a product which predicts severe weather outbreaks, and we have 11 of them that we predicted in one product. Okay, so if this verifies next week, which it will, I'm certain of it. It'll be 5 for 5. We predicted 5 of them, and they have happened. And it isn't, as some of the criticism has come in, it isn't a climatology forecast. Yes,
right.
On April 1st, climatologically, there's going to be severe weather located almost where it's predicted to be.
Okay.
But we didn't use just climatology like you can use because it doesn't happen every year on April 1st. It'll vary by days and where it's going to be located. What we do with our model is we know what the weather pattern is going to look at based on the LRC. So 50 days ago, 100 days ago, we have other versions of this pattern that are synoptic scale models that have already, so literally an actual initial condition of what has happened 50 days ago.
Right. These are recorded values,
right.
Yes.
So we then use that information as meteorologists. Okay, we'll get to the model in a second, and we look and see what the synoptic conditions will be. So when we predict a severe weather outbreak around April the 4th, okay, which is due in around April the 4th.
Okay.
You
heard it here first.
75 days ago.
There you go, yeah.
But we're basing it on what the pattern will look like synoptically. So
Right.
where will the surface low be? Where will the dry line? Where will everything be located? We have a projection of that from what we already know has happened. It's not climatology at all. It's the Storm Prediction Center takes, oh, look at this setup for next week. It looks like all the things are coming together for the potential for severe weather. We do the exact same thing that the Storm Prediction Center does. And what we're telling you with the LRC, the technology is available today to do that far in advance.
Right, and it's a different type of technology. This is where I feel like a lot of the misunderstanding has come in. We're not just trying to take existing physics models and stretch them and hope for the best.
And speaking of stretching, maybe we've talked about it, we'll apply the physics models at 100 days out at some point.
Yeah, I think, well, of course, there's value. There's value in, I was going to say, like, more information is better than less information, but it depends on what your outcome and your goal is. But this is just kind of like what we spoke in the last one. Like, experimentation is the key of what we're doing. Like, I think we can always do better. I would always like to do better. I'd like to explore different methodologies and inject different parameters. And sometimes you're injecting noise, and maybe it's not good, but it's worth trying.
Right.
Like, you got to know.
Yeah, so tell us, you helped, you got these ideas for me, and then we developed this statistical model. Tell us a little bit about the model that does exist.
So we take those initial conditions through a satellite network, right? So the Era 5 data is provided through the ECMWF.
Right, European model. ECMWF.
Yeah, this is the European Center for Mid-Range Weather Forecasting. I think is what it stands for. Yeah, right, okay. So they put out this data. Now, what's interesting about it is they do what's called a reanalysis. So every night we're ingesting all of the global weather conditions, again, for the entire world, but it's for like a week ago, okay? So we ingest global data. We have to be patient because what they'll constantly do is sort of, they obviously, it's a massive amount of data. So they want to go in and they go, all right, they're making sure that the data makes sense, number one, right? Because they will sometimes put out errant data and then they'll have to put out corrections. So we intentionally have a lag to make sure that we get high quality data coming out from them, right? So that's number one, high quality data, right? We don't necessarily have to second guess that data. And it's uniform, it's well laid out, it's accessible, it's fairly quick. The fact that it is publicly available is interesting. Sometimes you end up waiting in line to get access to it from like a programmatic standpoint, but there's nothing you can do about it. And it is funny, we've had like different clients be like, well, what's to stop us from just taking that data and doing what you're doing? Like, be my guest. It is intensely complicated.
Right.
Very, very complicated. So we take in all of this data. We have gridded out the planet Earth, okay? There are different methodologies of trying to grid out the Earth, but the Earth is not a perfect sphere. It has kind of an elliptical stretch to it. So it is difficult to get a uniform gridding, all right? Imagine taking like a globe, the shape of the Earth, and you cut out a piece of paper, a consistent piece of paper, and you try to just wrap it around the entire globe.
Right.
It's not going to work. You will have gaps. You have some pieces that get stretched and skewed. We originally started out using, I think Google's was called S2, but they use squares. But then you end up with parallelograms, and then it's not uniform sizes of gridding, right? So then it's difficult when you say, like, all right, I have a forecast cell. Some forecast cells are 500 square miles. Some are 57. Like, that's not uniform.
Right.
And especially from a data standpoint, you want a level of uniformity. Like, you need a reliable sense of uniformity. So we use Uber. They put out this open source coding system called the H3 gridding system, right?
This is real complex.
Is this too complex?
Well, no, it's okay.
Okay, I'm trying. Like, it interests me. I don't know. I find it fascinating.
So get to the conclusion of what the model does.
Well, I will, but these are all key components.
Keep
all right?
going.
Key components of why. So H3 uses hexagons because hexagons can uniformly distribute much more effectively over such a unique shape like the shape of the Earth, okay? So you get uniformity in shape and distribution. These are important components to what we're trying to do to help other people with our forecasts, right? So each forecast cell is about 100 square miles. A hexagon makes up about 100 square miles. And it's pretty uniform. It's very impressive. We have 2 million hexagons that we use as a total of the number of forecast cells.
So we have 100 square mile boxes all over the world.
Correct. And each one of those is a forecast cell. So we take the data that comes in from Era 5, and then we gridded up to match our system based on latitude and longitude. And we say, okay, these were the conditions in this forecast cell. These were the conditions forecast cell. Each one has its own unique ID, yada, yada, yada. It's a very impressive system. It's very good, very fast. And it's very nice of Uber to just put that out. It's what they use for their on-demand scaling system, right? Because it's very clever because they can at any moment in time scale up or down a hexagon and say like, okay, this big area is experiencing high demand. Let's boost the cost because we need to incentivize drivers to get there to meet demand, right?
Right.
So it's a very like clever supply and demand marketing concept mapped or that's sort of tied to a gridding system. And they put it up for free. We use it. It's great. It's very useful for what we're doing. Okay, so we have all the data. We have a gridding system. We then we say, all right, based on what Gary Lezak says, we're always looking at the atmosphere. This is what we think the cycles are, yada, yada, yada. So we are taking those conditions, what we had, and we're then projecting them forward, right, for the entire globe for each of the 2 million forecast cells.
Right.
All right?
Amazing.
It's great. So what we're doing is we're sort of looking at the statistical patterns that happen in the atmosphere, and that's where the cycles are sort of like born.
Right.
And that's how we're projecting them forward.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then we get results that work.
Absolutely, yes.
So, for example, let's go through a couple examples.
Yeah, so it becomes
ready?
an effective modeling. Like there is some concept, like there are a lot of people out there who are just trying to use 30-year averages, right? And 30-year averages are okay.
Right.
But that's where you sort of get into this level of like the murk of the criticism of like, you said it was going to be cold in winter and it was cold. Like,
Yeah.
Of course, that is a climatological concept of like, winter is cold, right? But the idea is we're identifying statistical events that
we're
occur.
about to identify for our customers on Substack, and you can go there, weather2020.substack.com.
For sure.
It's $300 a year, but these farmers are getting some really valuable information. We're about to predict when and where there's going to be a heat wave this summer.
Oh, really?
So,
Yeah.
And it's important to know when and where
very useful.
and possibly how long and how hot it's going to be, and et cetera. So we're going to be doing that. And so the model you just described, it's so complex, and yet it is working, and it's improving, and it provides the when and where.
Absolutely.
Other technologies and methodologies out there that exist today in meteorology and science aren't able to do what our model does, which is when and where. Can we go through a couple examples?
Yeah, let's do examples,
Okay.
and then I'll do a little more, and we'll break it up because I'll get a little more technical.
I want to
because it's kind of interesting.
I know, but I want to get right to the examples, and it's as Bob describes
great.
how we're even able to do that.
So for those of you just listening, because you can hear this podcast on all of the other
Right.
podcastable things, Gary is holding up a beautiful visual aid.
Right, and Ben's going to put it up there on the
Oh,
screen.
perfect. There we
But
go.
this is a Cassidy and Mitch wedding forecast for San Diego, California. All right, now San Diego, California, most days is going to be about 70 degrees and nice at
Fairly
the end,
consistent, yeah.
at the end of March. Well, Gary England, the famous Gary England, who was in the movie Twister, Gary England. He was my
a great
mentor,
credit, yeah.
Gary England, and his wife, Mary. Mary, at the end of January, asked me, she said, my granddaughter's getting married. Cassidy and Mitch wedding is in San Diego. Can you provide us a weather forecast? So I called up our model.
Right.
And I call up our model, and our model predicted, I gave her a whole video we'll look at in a second, but about 64 degrees. I put 65 degrees in there. 65 degrees, partly cloudy. It is looking dry. And I made a whole video explaining what the model shows. Let's listen to what the videos that I made on January 31st for our March 25th
Oh, yeah,
forecast.
yeah. Let's hear it. Okay, hit us.
Mary, I just called up my model, and I picked March 20th to March 27th. And this is for all of California. It shows a storm coming in March 20th, 21st, and 22nd, and then dry the 23rd, 24th, and 25th. So let me go to just San Diego County, apply filters. Here's just San Diego County now on my model. And you can see here, it shows that it will be rain only on the 22nd, but drying out on the 23rd, and especially the 24th and the 25th. Here's the 24th and 25th. It looks dry. So rain before you get there. and temperatures in the 60s. It says 64 degrees for high temperatures. All right, so 60s for high temperatures. That's how it looks right now. I'll put this together and send you a printout of it. But that's my computer model. So 60s, the chance of rain is before the wedding, and it should be dry at the end of the week. So as you heard there, the model predicted a storm coming through California 2 to 3 days before wedding day. That was the storm that produced the tornado in Los Angeles. You remember that video of the tornado in Los Angeles on March 22nd or so?
Right.
It predicted the storm, the model did, and their wedding forecast. It ended up being 63 degrees and partly cloudy and dry for their wedding in a stormy winter. It wasn't a typical San Diego year.
Absolutely. It has been atypical, to say the least, especially compared to the last handful of years.
And Gary England's a meteorologist, so Mary appreciated the long-range forecast that he thought was impossible years ago.
Right. That's an impressive win. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's probably a tough nut to crack too. Somebody that entrenched in like the traditional methodology.
Well, I sort of forced him to learn how to do it over the years.
Physically, or was this an emotional browbeating? What
can't
were we
you
doing?
see this?
Okay,
I've been doing that to so many of you out there. Here's another forecast. It's Japan. Okay,
right. Another visual aid.
Yeah, another visual aid. A customer of Future Snow, a company that we consult with, they were going to Japan to this resort. Hake Sanroku, probably ripping
nailed
that one apart.
No, you nailed it.
Hake Sanroku ski area in western Japan, and they were going February 18th to 25th. So weeks before, about 5 weeks before, we provided them this forecast day by day, and also created a video and let them see that there was a good chance of a storm on a certain day and good conditions, although it'd be a little warmer than average. And they said it worked. Your model worked. The people that went to Japan.
That's beautiful.
So it shows the global model. And this one we won't put up on the screen, but that is California.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
200 to 600% of average rainfall forecast for the winter this year.
Right.
Made in November before they had their winter.
That's outstanding.
Yeah.
That's a heck of a win, too. I mean, so it's tough here. One of the, I hate to keep harping on it. Like, some of the criticisms that we get are just like, oh, why don't you ever talk about when it didn't work? Why didn't you talk? We sort of addressed it last week. It's lame to me. I would say part of my response to this is something I was chatting with Gary about. You speak in examples because you've made a career of having to, like, connect with viewers, right? So I think there's a disconnect between like academia where everybody there has a specific language that they speak because they're typically talking within the confines of academia. They're used to talking to each other. They're not tasked with connecting with a viewer or an average person who doesn't have a massive breadth of information and knowledge and degree after degree and class after class or whatever of whatever topic they're discussing. So they're able to use their specific language to talk to one another, and that's almost the way they like can identify one another. Like, oh, you're in academia too, because we talk to each other using these the specific terminology. But you speak in examples,
right?
And which I think is fair. I think it is very fair. But I think some of the responsibility then falls on me because you can't be expected to keep your eyes on the globe at all times and say like, okay, well, yeah, statistically for the northwestern region of insert country here, we were X% this and this. That's not a realistic concept, right? So I will say some of the criticism I've softened. It's valid. I can do a better job of putting out statistics to be a little more transparent. It just takes work, and I am but one idiot. So
it's not 100% accurate, but it's based on this model. The technology and the methodology is based on the pattern that's cycling above us.
Okay? Right.
And there is order to the chaos. Now, we need to prove that there's order to the chaos. We will present over the next decade, more and more evidence will come to support our claim of what we say exists.
Absolutely, yeah.
We do have one paper that is published and out there.
Right, correct.
And there will be further examples. But when we get these forecasts accurately predicted, yes, there's some that don't come through. Okay, it's not absolutely perfect.
Sure.
But the river of air above us is cycling fairly perfectly. It's a river of air, regularly cycling, and that's what we're showcasing that we need to show more of. But I got example after example after example.
Right, and that's it. You tend to default to specific examples because it's easier to consume a successful win by something that like a human being, like, oh yeah, I remember that tornado. I remember that flood. I remember that storm. It's much easier for somebody to go like, oh yeah, I guess I do understand that. But I mean, I don't know. I feel like in order to satisfy all of the madness, someday we're just going to have to do a 10-hour special on all of the times it was wrong. Because the Weather Channel, of course, and my favorite special every year is the Weather Channel. Like, let's look at 2022, all the forecasts that we blew, right?
Do they do that?
No, nobody does that. Why would anybody
wow,
do that?
I haven't seen that show.
Right. It's the dumbest concept
Coming up,
to me.
a half-hour special. All the forecasts we did not get right.
Can you imagine CNBC going like, oh, all right, well, now at noon for the power lunch, we're going to talk about all of the stocks that we said we're going to pop, and then they didn't. We're going to center on all of the failures. Like, it's just kind of a conceptual stupidity.
It's natural. It's not something that we do or I do on purpose. It's like what we did this year is I spent, a good 20 to 40 hours on it, somewhere in that range, putting together that severe weather predictor.
Right.
Okay. And we predicted 11 times there would be severe weather this season. Didn't even look at climatology and based it on what the weather pattern was going to be, when these storms were going to happen. Of the first 5, we're going to be 5 for 5 when next week, April 4th happens, April 5th, severe weather happens. It's got to happen first. It hasn't happened yet, so we'll see.
Yeah.
But when that verifies, we made 5 predictions, 5 have happened. There are 6 more in our report. We have a hurricane season prediction that will be coming out.
Yes, indeed.
So,
I've had a sneak peek.
You did.
It's quite good.
Yeah, I know. I spent a lot of hours on that. So
it's good.
So there's an art and a science to what we do. The science to what we do, there's a lot of criticism out there for the science of what we do, but it's totally scientific, and we will share it. You know me.
Right.
So.
And that's the thing, that we don't have the power of academia behind us. The irony is we don't have the power of anybody behind us because everybody just wants to sit there and tell us we can't be doing
investment.
it. Yeah. That would be the idea.
Yeah,
it's like the nerve of somebody who's hiding behind $100 million federal grant to say, like, you're not doing enough. Like, we're trying to yell into the Grand Canyon to say, like, this is worth looking at. And then everybody else going like, well, how come you haven't done this? Because we don't have the power of the federal government and years of academia and all of the bias that comes along. It's a difficult battle. I'm sure I'm just whining here. Maybe this is my therapeutic release of like all of the years we've been doing this. I'm like, gosh, this is
especially the last few weeks with if you read Twitter, you're going to see all the criticism of me personally.
How do you do that?
And I read it, but I've been through it for a long time. But I'm sick and tired of hey, let me show you, and then all of you out there, eventually you'll say, oh, I'll give you that one, I'll give you that one, I'll give you that one. I have people that have said, I'll give you that one 100 times. Eventually you would say, gosh, there's got to be something to this if I've said that 100 times.
Yeah, and so I am trying to be empathetic with those people and say, okay, so maybe they need more of the academic. Scientific representation of what we're doing, because again, you tend to speak in examples, and so then they're able to then say you cherry picked, right, and so like I get it. I'm really trying to put myself in their shoes. Like, all right, if I had this certain set of beliefs and somebody came to me and this is the way they spoke about it, I guess these are the criticisms I would develop too. So I'm trying to have empathy for this, but it is still maddening. So again, I recognize, like, I will do a better job of like producing more of the academic style, I don't know, proof for evidence.
To your point, you're one guy, I'm one guy.
Yeah.
Our company is growing. Weather 2020 is really significantly growing at this moment, and our goal is to save lives and to help businesses. I'm sick of watching these businesses lose money when they think, oh, it's weather, there's nothing we can do about it. No, it's weather, and there's something you can do about it. And data analytics is being used all over the world now. How many people are going to end up at Quick Trip this week? Well, okay, there's another factor that's not being considered, because until now, weather data wasn't accurate enough. It is accurate and reliable enough and effective that you can predict how many people are going to come into your business and what they possibly are going to buy based on the weather. when it's in the 20s and snowing. Last year, how many people came into Home Depot?
Right, you look for the correlation.
And what did they buy when they went in there when it was these weather conditions?
Right.
Our model predicts those same weather conditions in the future, and you can predict that one example and affect your bottom line and help your business decisions. So weather data in the future, if it is predictable, which it is with the system we know,
right,
the LRC. So. And it's effective enough. So that's what we're doing, and that's our goal, to help save lives too.
And it's expensive. So this will get me back to a little bit of the technical concepts. And if I'm boring you, please give me the
You're
high
not
side.
boring me.
Okay. Well, if
I'm learning. Is this chapter 2?
This might be like 2.8. So like. I don't know. I'm in a rambling mood today. I guess I should apologize to everyone. So we use AWS, right? And so it's Amazon's Web Services. So previously, computing power like this was not available to pretty much anyone. You needed a quote unquote supercomputer, right? And so that's even where some of like the physics models, I remember it was like a space race of just like who has the strongest computers, whose supercomputer is the superest, and like, so how many model runs can they do in how many minutes or seconds or hours, right? So that was part of what was considered like the more effective models were just more powerful computers, right? Wasn't even necessarily that they were doing anything different. It was just we can run more models. So with the advent of AWS, you now have access to on-demand supercomputing, okay? So this is what we use. We use it both for storing a tremendous amount of data, which now, for one of the first times in like human civilized history, is affordable. Because, I mean, global data, there's a lot of it. And you need a lot of it.
It's still $50,000 a year just for our company.
Oh yeah, minimum. Yeah, and that's without running. Like we have all of these experiments we want to run, and I'm always like, well, I don't know, man. Is it in the budget right now?
I need you to run 3 computer models.
Yeah, minimum. Like there's so many cool things that I would love to do, but you have to work within what we have access to, right? And it's fascinating. We work with a company called NetApp. They were previously called Data Mechanics. They got acquired by the super company NetApp. It's fascinating. The concept of supercomputing and processing power has become such a commoditized concept that this company specializes in cutting your AWS bill in half.
Wow.
Right? So they spin up supercomputing boxes on demand when you need them, but their algorithms help save you money. You can run it at different times a day. So if demand is high for AWS, right, then you'll end up paying more. It's surge pricing just like anything else. But they'll have some reserve. I mean, there's all these different ways that you can try to save money, but still be able to get massive access to these crazy computing powers. So with the release of AWS and similar competitors, we just happen to be on them. It's interesting that I think the stigma of what we're doing and even a lot of concept around computing is changing, because now there is this realization that like everybody has a supercomputer in their pocket. We can afford it. Like the average person, like I've done, like even just with like stock trading, right? Like just from a personal perspective, like I'll throw something out to a supercomputer and run some quantifiable, whatever, just because it's like $7.
You haven't shared this information with me.
Oh no, I love it, man.
When you find out, you're gonna let me know which stock to buy, right?
Well, sure. Well, the idea being, if you have a model that like you don't even have to know, your model just does it for you, right? Because this is the thing. I don't want to have to buy and sell stocks. Right. I'm building a robot to do that. Right. So that I don't even have to mess with it.
Oh my God.
That's been one of my favorite hobbies in the last however many years. But that's the thing. Like now, me as just a schmuck in Kansas City, I can do that because it costs $7 to do a run.
Amazing.
It's nuts. And so the concept of AI, which is just fancy statistics. Everybody, we use the concept of intelligence to describe like artificial intelligence. These are like the thinnest sliver of paper.
I hear that they're going to take over the world with AI.
I mean, look, sure, anything's possible. Like I am mildly skeptical in the short term. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't care about it now. Like now is where you start to set up the guardrails to say like, let's try to keep this from going out of control. But right now you just have a bunch of very fancy statistical models trying to predict what word should come after this other word. That's it. These people have done a lot of categorizations and say like, okay, when you refer to flowers and blue sky or whatever, like statistically after the word purple, the next word is rain. So if you're a Prince fan.
Right.
So I'm just saying that's like,
I love Prince.
oh, you got to. I love it. It's great. So, statistics are running a lot of things. All of these machine learning models are just fancy statistics. They're not necessarily artificial intelligence. Right. We've used that as a catch-all, right? And so what we're doing is we're using statistics too, conceptually. Like, so you have a company releasing ChatGPT and everything, right? They're fancy statistical models.
So you're saying that the LRC model is a really great statistical model. There's other statistical models being used today.
Yes.
Why not ours? Because we actually have results.
Yes, 100%. Everybody is putting all of their love juice into the idea of like artificial intelligence. Again, it's just statistics.
Right.
We have entire industries built off statistics, like pharmaceutical industries. They're doing statistical anomalies consistently.
Right.
If we even just refer to like the most famous example of like Viagra, right?
Yeah.
It was supposed to be a blood pressure medication.
Right.
And then they realized like, oh, this
Look
actually
what it does.
Statistically, there's something else happening.
I didn't realize that.
We just market it as this, right? And so that was just
So
statistics.
Viagra was originally what?
It was a blood pressure medication.
Okay, how about that?
Yeah. And so, like, we still, from the pharmaceutical world, they don't even know how a lot of these things work. If you read the ads and you read the papers, they go, it is believed that it targets the, like,
Right.
they're just saying statistically this is what it does.
Right.
And so we're going to give it to people because, like, X% of times it does this thing.
X% of time it shows results.
Yes, it shows this level of success. I don't know. It just it's weird the selective ability to say like this is good, this is bad, even though conceptually they're in the same bucket.
I've got a meeting with an investor.
I'm sorry. Okay,
I got a meeting with an investor.
How long are we running here?
If you want to invest in what we're
I'm
doing,
boring you. I knew I was going to bore you.
Are you boring? Is he boring? There's no boring. Okay, there's no boring in Bob.
Golly,
Okay,
that's awfully
oh
sweet.
my God, that was.
Jeez, did we answer the questions? I don't even know what were the questions.
Of course not.
Am I too far in the weeds?
We explained a little, pretty deep into what our model is, the ingredients behind it, and the technology, and how there's other statistical models out there.
Yeah, that everybody loves and says it's going to change the world, yet somehow you're the jerk on Twitter.
And
incredible.
The physics-based models do have a 15-day limit on accuracy. The LRC model is not a physics-based model. It's tomorrow's model for weather. All right, so we have tomorrow's model that you can apply now. So go to weather2020.com, weather2020.substack.com if you want to become a customer. It's just $300 a year for farmers, energy, or storm chasers for that matter. We go over everything.
That's excellent. What are we forecasting this week? Are we
we're
forecasting
better workouts. All right. All right.
Is that possible?
Better workouts.
35 reps? Is that what we're doing?
Thank you, David Schlossman, Results Personal Fitness. Thank you to Uphold Home. Thank you for listening to Bob today on the forecast.
Again, statistically, I talk too much. I'm sorry.
No, Gary Lezak and
Bob Lyons.
Have a great week.
Bye, everybody.